Okay, so now that we have our PlayerTracker script and we also have our UI script, so I'm going to actually let me just minimize this. Okay. So we're going to select the PlayerTracker and we're going to drag and drop the first the HUD script and the PlayerTracker script. So then you can move this down if you want. It's really up to you, and you can set you have to set the obstacle HUD to HUD. So now that's done, I'm going to go to the art and then audio and the checkpoint audio. I'm going to choose it. I'm going to drop it inside the checkpoint sound. Or you can click on the circle and you can choose checkpoint sound. Okay, so now that's done. Let's go and start working with the checkpoint script. So go back to our Visual Studio Code. Go to checkpoint script. And the checkpoint script, we're going to have a few things. First, a serialized field. Now this is going to be the stage and it's going to be a number. This will be editable in the Unity project or the Unity scene. So whatever object this script is attached to, we will be able to change its number. And we're also going to require the player tracker. So I'm going to say local player tracker equal require player tracker. Since that's a module, I can require it. And then I'm going to create a function, or I'm going to listen to the function, which is the client awake. But we don't need to do client awake here because the type is already client. So I'm just going to do awake. And in the client awake, I'm also going to listen to another function, which is the onTrigger enter. So onTrigger enter. The onTrigger enter takes the other as a collider, and that other must be the player. So we're going to say local player character. So local player character equal other dot game object dot get component character. Meaning, we get the character component from the other game object. And if player character is nil, then we return and we exit the function. Does that make sense? We basically listen to the onTrigger enter whenever someone hit that collider, and then we get the player character from the other, which is the default parameter for the onTrigger enter, and we get the character component. If the object doesn't have a character component, we basically return because that's not the player that hit that object. Now we're going to say local player equal client.local player. We always want to work with the local player, and then we're going to say if. Actually, we could say, okay, actually to remove that and say local player equal player character.player, and then we're going to check if the player equal to the client.local player, if that makes sense. I don't want to make it confusing for you, but the client.local player is where the script is running, and the player character.player is the player that hits that object. And then if the player is equal to the local player, we are basically going to say player tracker dot, and what did we call the function? It was update stage, and we're gonna be passing the stage over here. Now, to give you a quick overview of what happened here, I'm gonna move the player tracker to the right side of the screen, and I'm also going to scroll down inside the client awake. Here we created a function, we called it update stage, and this script itself is a module script, meaning that we can require it this way, right? So now that we have a function that updates this stage, now inside that function it takes the new stage. And here we are passing the stage, which is the serialized field, and that serialized field will be editable in the Unity project. Does that make sense? And now when we call the update stage, we are sending a request to the server with the new stage. And when the server is basically listening to that or getting that request, it's updating the player stage value. When the player stage value being updated, we are basically telling the client that whenever this stage updates, we play the audio for them. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense, right? Okay, perfect. Alright, so now if you go back to Unity, and we are going to select the checkpoints, and for example, if we were to select this checkpoint, we are going to add the script, which is the checkpoint. So I'm going to go to scripts and core, and the checkpoint script, I'm going to move it and put it right here. And this is the stage 1, which is stage, actually this is stage 0, right? So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. No, actually this is stage 1. Okay, 1. I'm gonna select the other checkpoint and I'm gonna put it here, and this is gonna be 2. Again, let's do this for everyone, every single one. 3 and 4, and that's it. So here we are not going to set a checkpoint because this is not a checkpoint. This is basically a finish zone. And that's what we are going to work on right now, the finish zone script. So let's open the finish zone script and the finish zone script. So the finish zone script is somewhat similar to the or the checkpoint script. So if I move this here and put it right here and start coding on this side of the screen. So I'm going to first make a serialized field for the particle system. And I'm going to call this when particles. There's going to be a particle system and another serialized field, and this is going to be the win sound. So you can call this victory sound if you want. You can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call this win sound. And it's going to be an audio shader. Audio shader is going to be nil. Now, this is a client and server script. So we have to listen like we did before in the player tracker. Function self client awake and the server awake. Self server, right? So this script will basically be the same as the checkpoint. It will also take the trigger enter. So I'm going to listen to that function right now by doing function self on trigger enter. So on trigger enter. Again, it's other, and that other is a collider. And the same goes here. So we're gonna say local player character equal other the game object get component and then the character. And then if player character is nil, we are just going to return then return and but if there's a player, so player equal player character dot player if client dot local player equal to the player. And if you want to make it look the same, we just move this here. So it's something like if player equal then end. Now here we're gonna create a few events. So the first event to communicate, it's always if you want to communicate between client and server, you have to create events because otherwise you will not be able to communicate without events. So the first event is gonna be local win request equal. Let me make it like that. Okay, so event.new. Again, copy this, put it right here. Local the win response. It's also an event. Gonna be the same as this name, so put it right here. So now we want to fire the win request event whenever someone hit that trigger, because this trigger is based on the finish point, right? And whenever a player hit that trigger, we will just basically tell the server that this player has done it, right? We're gonna say win request fire server, and this will automatically fire the player who hit the collider because it's the client local player. Now, to make things look better, we are going to create a function, and that function is going to play the win effects. So function play win effect and basic win particle play through and the audio dot audio. Oh, I hate the play shader. Okay, I don't hate how it's written. Play shader. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Win sound. There you go. Done. Okay, perfect. Now that's done. We fire the event. Remember, every time you fire an event, you have to listen to it. So I'm gonna listen to it in the server. So if I scroll down and do win request. So connect, function, and now here we are basically going to fire it to all the clients. So whenever someone, here we checked if the player is the local player, we fire an event to the server, and in the server we listen to that event, and whenever we listen to that event, we are going to fire the response. So when response, fire all clients. And actually, sorry, we're gonna use the method here, fire all. So now when we fire the win response, we have to listen to that event again. So I'm gonna put it under the play win effect. I'm gonna say win response connect function play win effect. Okay, does that make sense? So we're basically listening to the client awake, right? And we created two events. We also have serialized field with the particle system and the win sound. And then we created a function that plays the win sound and the particle system. And then we checked if the player hit the collider, or on trigger enter, we used it on trigger enter. We checked if that object that hit the collider has the character component. We fire an event to the server and we listen to that event and we tell the client that, okay, yes, this player has hit that win, and then we fire it back to all the clients. And then we basically listen to that event and we play the win effects. Now, if we go to Unity, and in Unity, and we select the finish zone, which is this zone right here, and we drag and drop the finish zone script, which is the finish zone right here, and we have a win sound and a win particle. So if you select the win sound, we already have a victory for you, victory sound. So you click on that, and then the win particles, if you click on it, we already have an object that plays the particles for you. So I'm gonna use that. Does that make sense? Now we're gonna save it, and that's exactly what we're trying to do right here. Now, if I go to finish zone, just to give you a quick example on what the on trigger enter is. Now the finish zone right here has a box collider. You see the box collider? And there's like around it, there's let me just turn off this. Wait 1 sec. Okay. So you see the box around this? Whenever the player enters that collider, it will run the script. And then we get the player. And if the player has reached or has hit that collider, we basically send a request to the server and we're going to be like, okay, so play the particle effects. And where's the particle effects? So it will just hit play for us. Does that make sense?